I am just outside more than I have been in the past, or if it is just like salamander season in Northwest Arkansas. But I feel like every time I open the door, there's a salamander. Years ago, we actually had one in the house and had to chase it into a closet, and it took a couple of hours to get it out, and it was a whole thing. And so I'm really kind of sensitive about them. But as you can see, they're still hanging out on my porch in the front of my house. I think it's because we have the cat water bowl out there, and they're trying to get a drink. Last year we had like frogs and snakes and lots of like possums and raccoons and stuff coming up and drinking out of that water bottle because it's just so hot and so dry. We had a huge rain this morning, but you would never know it by how dry it is out there just because of just how hot it is, right? It's just all evaporating. But anyway, there you go. There's another salamander video. I probably, since they have been featured in like 2 or 3 of my videos so far this season, you guys probably think that I have an obsession, but I really don't. I just think it's crazy that they are everywhere. All right, so when I was going through I was kind of cleaning off my laptop a few hours ago, and I found the video from last week that I made to talk about the books that I read last week, like 2 weeks ago, I guess. And I realized I actually never put it up. So I'm going to make this video a little shorter than planned, and I have condensed that video down shorter than it was, and I'll just tack it onto the end of this one, so you'll have 2 weeks of reading wrap up to listen to, but hopefully it won't be, super extremely long. I haven't actually read as much as I normally do this week, and I think that's just because I've been planning for my trip. My kids have been gone to camp, and so I've had the house to myself a lot. And so I've tried to find other things that I don't normally do during my days, just to kind of, have a chance to do that stuff. And so I have done some art, some mixed media art. I actually went out shopping for art supplies. That was fun. I never do that. And I've been sewing, and I've been working on a puzzle, and I've just been kind of chilling out and doing other things that I don't normally do. So I haven't read nearly as much as I thought I would, but I have also been like on Google Maps planning out walking routes and all these things for my trip that is upcoming. I wanted to talk to you guys about that for just a second, because I have in the description box a link, and it is basically just name and email, and it is a way for you guys to sign up to get updates on my upcoming literary tour. So next spring of 2026, I am going to be hosting a literary tour in England. It will be Jane Austen themed, and we're going to visit a few sites that were special to her, where she lived or where important things happened in her life. And I'm going to take a small number of people. I think my tour is only going to be like 8 people. I want it to be pretty small and intimate so that we can have lots of conversation, and you can just really get around easier when it's a smaller group of people as well. And so who knows, maybe, one of these days it'll grow and I'll do several tours a year so everybody can get on. But basically, the sign up in my description box is just to get on the email list for updates. You're not like agreeing to anything. You're not committing to anything. This is not you signing up for the tour. It's just so that I have a way to contact those who are interested, to let you know when I put this sign up out, and when I get the itinerary ready and the cost breakdown and all that kind of stuff, I can send that out to the list of people interested. So if you are even just remotely interested in going to England and visiting Jane Austen sites with me next spring, put your name on that email list, and you can always get off it if you decide that you're not interested in the emails anymore or whatever. But people are going to be asking me things like dates. I don't know, spring 2026. That's why I'm taking this tour next week, is just to kind of finish all of my plans that have been rolling around in my head for the last many years, and just nail down, where exactly I want to stay and how exactly I want to travel from this place to another. So that's what I'm doing next week, is just kind of the finishing touches on my plan. And then I will get the dates all figured out and the costs and all the stuff. And I will put out a formal announcement sometime during Jane Austen July. and give you guys all the details. And at that point, there'll be a whole other sign up process, right? So don't worry about all that, but it will be sometime next spring. People are going to want to know about costs. So I'm trying to keep it very cost effective. I never would have been able to go on my first trip to England had I not gone with my friend's tour group, where she made a payment plan for us over like 9 months, so that all of us moms with little kids at home who really wanted to go, but couldn't, just come up with $4,000 on one pop or whatever, we were able to pay in little installments to her. I'm going to do the same thing. So I can tell you that there will be an initial deposit that will be $500 or less for your initial deposit to save your spot. And then after that, you'll be on a payment plan if you choose to be, or you can just pay the whole thing at once, whatever. But most people will probably want to be on a payment plan over the next 9 months and break all those costs down, so that this will be something that you can, have a big yard sale. You can do like a car wash, like whatever you got to do to save money over time. And the last of it won't be due until about 6 weeks before we leave. So like I said, I'll give you guys all the details on that later, but those are the two big things people have been asking me already. So I just want to let you know I am trying to make it super affordable. I'm going to teach you guys how to travel in Southern England in an affordable way, and it's going to be something that I'm hoping will springboard you into maybe even living a life of travel. People want to know, how come I can go back to England over and over again when I'm a one-income family and I've got 9 kids and all that kind of stuff. How am I able to afford that? Well, I want to teach you guys how to do that. And so I will be putting up some vlogs while I'm there this next week, so you guys can kind of watch and see what I'm doing. But anyway, more details on all that later. Check out the link in the description box if you guys think that you might want to go, or even just know what it is we're doing and dream and go later or whatever. All right, so let's get into what I read last week. So I actually really only finished one book. I actually just finished it a little bit ago today. This is Jane Austen, A Life by Claire Tomalin. This is the biography that Claire Tomalin wrote, and I've read several other biographies by her and have liked her as a biographer in the past. I'm not saying that I didn't like her as a biographer this time, but I think what is going on now is I'm kind of saturated with like new knowledge about Jane Austen. I've read just about everything that is like readily available, right? Like the basic Jane Austen life. And I've visited the places that she lived and hung out, and I've done the stuff. So like, I could win at Jane Austen pub trivia and all that kind of stuff. But I think I'm at the point now where rather than looking at this author as like a scholar who can teach me a bunch of stuff, I'm looking her as more like a peer and fellow Jane-ite, right? And so where our conversations would probably not be, Claire Tomalin telling me these 55 things that I never knew about Jane Austen, it would be more about, one of us coming up with a topic and then us both conversing back and forth. It's like, that's how I feel now when I read biographical information by her, is like I'm critiquing it based on my own understanding and perspective on Jane, and not necessarily on, did this thing teach me a lot? Does that make sense? So that's why I had to DNF the Lucy Worsley biography so quickly, because her version of Jane is not my version of Jane. And to some extent, neither was Claire Tomalin's. I think what was really getting to me was, I don't feel like Claire Tomalin showed that she had an understanding of Jane Austen's like super dry humor, her sarcasm, her cynical attitude and outlook on things. I don't think that that this biographer showed that she like got all the jokes, right? Because there was quite a few times in here where she would quote something that Jane said or wrote, and then her interpretation was just so negative and just not right. So the whole time Jane was, she was kidding. It was just a joke. Or, she was making light of a serious situation by using dry humor. And I don't know that the author really got that, but I could be wrong. Maybe I didn't get this author. That could be the thing too. Another thing, and later in this video, I'm going to talk about a book of Jane Austen's prayers that I read. I've really always been interested in studying her faith and just kind of trying to understand the faith of like the Church of England, members as a whole. And that's a topic for another video, so I won't even go into that. But I did take note here. The author of this biography says that Jane didn't write very much about religion. And then it says about her inner spiritual struggles, she has nothing to say. And I just thought that was kind of a naive point of view to take, that Jane Austen would never have talked about her own faith. For one thing, when you are a person of faith and it's really is your life, you just kind of walk it out. Like, I don't have to always look at you and be like, don't forget, I'm a person of faith. Oh, don't forget, by the way, I went to church last Sunday, or I don't know, whatever. Like, I read my Bible 5 times last week. Like, if you're a person of faith, you just kind of live out the life of faith, and people see that in your fruit, right? So I think that's one of the things that we have to recognize is we see that in her fruit, right? And the way that she conducted her just everyday self. But we also need to remember that a whole lot of her personal writing was destroyed. And we've never found a diary or a journal. So either somebody is keeping them very well hidden or somebody destroyed them after she died. Do we really want to believe that Jane Austen never kept a diary or a journal? That's pretty hard to believe. And so maybe that's where she wrote about her spiritual life. Maybe it's in the letters that were destroyed. We know that the good majority of her correspondence with people was destroyed. Maybe a lot of that talked about her spiritual life. Maybe she did hash out her spiritual struggles in those letters, to her sister or to her niece. And they didn't want that stuff being a blot on the family, since her father was a religious leader over a church. I mean, who knows? But it's just hard for me to just say, well, she just must have never talked about her religion. I think it's more that we just haven't seen blatant, I am a Christian sort of messages from Jane Austen. But you see it in her life, in her everyday life, right? And also there's just several places where the author just makes her out to be such a despairing, negative person. And I don't think that is the case. Jane Austen had the opportunity on more than one occasion to marry into wealthy families, to have children, to have status, to have wealth, to have all the things, to be regarded highly and popularly in society. She had the opportunity to do those things. She chose not to. She valued her own sense of self and peace more than all of these other things. She probably enjoyed having the freedom that she had as a single woman. So it was just really hard for me to come alongside the author here in these cases where she is, saying such despairing things about Jane Austen. Talking about how she was penniless, dependent on her brothers, obliged to accept whatever living arrangements were chosen for her. These were not things you wrote down. If possible, you did not allow yourself to even think about them. I don't know, if someone wanted to support me so I could just live in a cottage and write all day, I don't think I would be despairing, just want to say. She says, looking back from our easier century, you feel how wretched it must have been when a longed-for marriage brought pregnancy and illness almost before the couple could enjoy one another. She talks about how much help that Jane and her sister had to provide to their sisters-in-law because they had so many children. And she says she loved them, but the demands of that love left her time unprotected, and this made her hate them too. Do we ever have evidence that Jane Austen hated her nieces and nephews? No, we do not. They had such highly respectful things to say about her. She clearly loved them. She clearly had fun with them, and they with her. Just, I don't even know. This author does go on and on about the poor plight of the wretched childbearing woman. At one point, she makes it sound like babies are diseases or they are intentional murderers. She's talking about one of these women, one of the friends of the family. It says, they had 8 children in 12 years, and the 8th baby killed her. His brother Edward's wife died of her 7th child about the same time. 2 more casualties of the unquestioned custom of bearing a baby every 18 months. I have so much to say to that, and so I'm just going to say it. First of all, the 8th baby killed her. Who talks like that? I'll tell you who talks like that. His brother's wife died of her 7th child. You don't die of a child. Like, you die of pneumonia. You die of food poisoning. You don't die of a child. That's such a weird way to put it, as if it were some kind of disease. But, you know, this whole idea of the unquestioned custom of bearing a baby every 18 months. Right? People have had big families all throughout history. It's not just a thing of the years without birth control. People have big families now. I have 9 children myself. Many of my friends have large families. We exist, even today in the 21st century. Frank's wife Mary was another poor animal, casualty of too much childbearing. I seriously, like, my enjoyment for this author just went downhill faster and faster and faster the further I got through this book. Many times she calls childbearing women animals. It's just disgusting. You know, I don't know. I don't even, if I go off on this anymore, I'm going to offend somebody. But anyway, I just wasn't a fan. Now that I'm thinking about it, I think she's only going to get 3 stars. So that's what I read. And I'm done. Yay. Nice little refresher on Jane Austen before I go. And so I just finished that a couple of hours ago. So I'll be starting something new tonight. Not exactly sure what, but I did quickly want to talk about some of the films that I've watched, because later in this video, you will hear me talk about my new dedication to keeping track of the films that I watch and what I think about them. So I was going to share with you guys a couple. Actually, I've watched 3 since I made that last video. So the first one is House in the Square. This features Tyrone Power, Anne Blythe, Michael Rennie, and Dennis Price. This film came out in 1951, and it's about an atomic scientist who is kind of obsessed with the idea of time traveling back to his ancestors who lived during the time of the Regency, 1784. So, you know, time of the Regency, time of the Georgians. And so thankfully, lightning strikes this guy and he gets the opportunity. And he goes back, and he's not super careful with his words, and they soon think that he is crazy, and that, or he is, you know, like a demon. And so they want to lock him up. And it's just kind of a fun story. It has a little bit of a love story in it, and it's a fun sci-fi, you know, 1950s, just to kind of think about the consequences of time traveling. Then the next one I watched was called The Man Who Could Cheat Death. This one came out in 1959. It stars Anton Diffring, Hazel Court, and Christopher Lee. And I don't know how I ended up watching this. I was just on some kind of a rabbit trail thing and found this show, but it is so, like, this is so out there. Dr. Bonet is actually 104 years old, but he looks to be like in his mid-30s. He has a way of keeping himself looking young and alive throughout the decades, and that has been put at risk in this show. And so you get to see what happens when a really old guy in a really young body loses contact with his source of proper care. It ends up being kind of a horror at the end. The last 30 seconds just kind of all turn super chaotic, but I really liked it. It was crazy. And then the third one is the movie Mary Shelley that came out in 2017. This stars Elle Fanning, Douglas Booth, and Belle Powley, which I didn't realize, but Douglas Booth and Belle Powley were married, which is cool. But in this, they are not, because this story tells the story of Mary Shelley and Percy and Claire Claremont, her stepsister. Lord Byron is also there, and all the gang, right? That other guy that wrote The Vampire. Can't remember I can't ever remember his last name, but it's John something with a P, maybe. Anyway, this story in the movie does not actually follow the biographical information that we have on these people in any way, shape, or form, except for possibly Byron. Everybody else, Polidori, that's his name, John Polidori, who wrote The Vampire. Anyway, everybody else is portrayed in a pretty generous way. I can't think of the exact word that I'm trying to use here, but it's not accurate to what we have on biography about these people and their history. Mary Shelley is portrayed very naively and sort of saintly and with a lot more integrity than she actually seems to have had. And everyone is kind of given the benefit of the doubt, I think. And so it's kind of a letdown once you watch this and you see like what it could have been and then like read about what it was. This film kind of broke through something in me, and what they did, I don't want to go into it because I really want you to watch this and get it for yourself. Just know that it has a lot of difficult scenes. You don't want to watch it with kids. But it really made me think about, one, the story Frankenstein, which I'm always ragging on and talking about what a lousy story it is. The way that they used her life and maybe what she was feeling internally, even if she wasn't acting externally in this way, and compared it to the Frankenstein story and that search for love from those who made you who you are, from those who helped shape who you are now. They used Mary Shelley's story of just feelings of abandonment, feelings of never being anybody's number one, and applied that to her reasons for writing Frankenstein and the fact that, he started off good. He started off with hope and joy, and when he was born, he was just like, hey world, here I am, what beautiful things are there to see? But when he was rejected by his creator and rejected by those who, traditionally should have loved him, it made him turn cold and angry and dangerous, and it made him, terrorize humanity. And the film used that parallel to kind of explain why Mary was so inspired to write Frankenstein. That really messed with me. Then going back and, rereading some of her biography and stuff, I'm like, well, yeah, maybe it really wasn't that way, but it could have been. And even if it wasn't, like that it made me think about how a writer really writes a lot of times from their own personal tragedy. And it made me think about how more careful I want to be when I am criticizing someone's creative work. I think that I don't feel the same about being critical about nonfiction as I do about being critical about fiction. Nonfiction, a lot of times, is just relaying facts and perspectives and whatever. And so I think with facts, that's just the way it is. If you get your facts wrong, then, somebody's going to criticize you. But with fiction, it really comes from a creative place that is unique to each person, right? And so, I feel like I just want to be more careful about criticizing fictional things, fictional works, because a lot of times those do come out of someone's tragedy or at least their own emotional response. And who am I to speak to that, right? What they pour out from their very soul might not affect me one bit, but it did affect them, right? And so anyway, just kind of went on that little tangent of thinking and sort of having regrets about some of the things that I've said about fictional creative works in the past. And just, I understand that part of having a channel is being a critic, but I don't know. I have to be more careful and more forgiving, I guess, more tolerant. I don't know what the right word is. I thought that the costumes in this film were really incredible. I loved them. And a couple of quotes, her dad ends up finding some of her juvenilia that she had just written, and he looks at it and he hands it back and he says, "These are the words of an imitator. Rid yourself of the thoughts and words of others. Find your own voice." And I think we can apply that to all kinds of stuff, all kinds of things. And then also somebody says something like, "This isn't the occasion for doing this one thing," or whatever. She says, "Your mistake is waiting for the occasion." And so I kind of took that to heart too. If I want to do the thing, I can't wait for someone to make my own happiness. I'm in charge of my own happiness. My mom always used to tell me that when I was little, you make your own happiness. And so I don't need to wait for the occasion. I just need to make the occasion happen. But anyway, I really did like the Mary Shelley movie. It gave me a lot to think about, and like I said, it is not anywhere near the biographical information, so if you're looking for something that will like tell you who Mary Shelley was, like this isn't really the movie for that. But just to get maybe if you can take out the fact that these were real characters, or at least for her, you know, take out the fact that she was a real person and just kind of insert like a person who wants to write but really is looking for a reason, looking for her muse. This is a fantastic movie for that, so really liked it. All right, guys, I'll put up the video from last week here on the end of this. You know, as a whole, the month of May really has gone quite slowly for me compared to the few months before it. It's not that our life was a lot slower than it had been in earlier spring months. I think it's just that we didn't have a whole lot that we had to do this month. And so I think it was just more like a comparison to what we were doing in March and April, between weddings and our new granddaughter being born and my mother coming out to visit. I think that May just seemed slower because we didn't have all those other things that we really were enjoying, but were going by way too fast, right? But this past week in particular has gone by pretty quickly in comparison. I can't believe that I'm at the end of the week and filming another weekly reading wrap up. It's really flown by. It's also been a week of DNFs, which is weird. Sometimes, you know, you just get in that slump where you're DNFing everything. And I think it's because I chose to only mood read in May. And I think I'm just not in the mood for mood reading anymore. Almost everything that I have tried to pick up has been fictional stories, just kind of lighthearted, things that probably I won't respond very deeply to once I finish them. And that was all great for the first few weeks. But this week, it was boring me. So I will share with you what I finished and what I'm currently reading, but just know that there's quite a few DNFs in there, and big DNFs, like 70 pages in on a couple of them, when I just decided, yeah, I can't do this. In fact, I only finished one novel this week, and that is Small Favors by Erin Craig. Now, I've had this book on my shelf for quite a few months. I purchased it in the fall because another booktuber that I like to watch, she has a birthday month in October as well, and she had received it as a gift, and she was kind of talking about it being a retelling of Rumpelstiltskin. I saw the cover of it, and it was just beautiful. But I kept it on my shelf for a long time without reading it because it was kind of one of those purchases that I was like, should I really read this? Like, does this fit in with, you know, my reading tastes as well as like what I allow myself to be sort of exposed to? Something that I really try to avoid are topics of witchcraft and magic. And I just didn't know how deep into all of that this book was going to go. So it was sort of an impulse buy, but it was also kind of like I know that maybe I shouldn't be reading this, but I'm also very curious. So I did buy the book, put it on my shelf, and then when I was actually trying to do an unhaul, I ended up making a big pile of things to read instead. And this was one of them. Now, I have to say that I did give this book 5 stars. It does feature some things that I'm not cool with, but really, if you remove a little bit of the like lucky object idea, such as a rabbit's foot or a clover, there's a couple places where these come into play as being objects that were able to sort of ward off evil. If you take that out and you take out the profanity, this book has so many biblical themes. In fact, it reminded me a lot of the works by Frank Peretti, a Christian author, especially his book called The Oath. It's a lot like The Oath, which I think is another reason why I decided to pick this up. Because I was like, I wonder if this is a similar story. And it was very much a similar story to that. So it is a Rumpelstiltskin retelling to some degree. It does actually focus a lot on the power of a name and what we call things and the power we give them by naming them, and And biblically, that kind of speaks into the power of the tongue, the power of our words, to build up or to destroy. There is a lot in here about bringing things out into the light in order to expose them and in order to then remove the evil, right? Because we know that when there is hidden evil, once we bring it out into the light, there's not a whole lot the enemy can do anymore, right? It's been exposed. And then that's when we can start dealing with the problem and find freedom and healing and wholeness. There was a lot of that theme in this book, and pretty well done for a non-biblically focused book. There were a lot of religious themes. The community in this book is very similar to the Amish in the way that they are very isolated. They have their own way, and when you won't, walk in that way, you have the potential of being shunned as a discipline, right? And as a, hey, we can't have evil in our midst, therefore you're going to have to go no matter how much we love you, right? It reminded me of the Amish in that way, but the setting and the feel was a little bit more Little House on the Prairie meets Puritan Salem sort of an idea. It's really kind of a gentle story, except for the parts where it's not. And I think that actually added to kind of the creepiness element of this whole story, because throughout the entire book, you are waiting for something really creepy to happen, but all the creepiness is just pretty gentle for the most part. This community starts off being very united, loving, happy, peaceful, fine, whatever. But there's something in the forest that is affecting them. And when people go into the forest, a lot of times they don't come back out. But sometimes they do. And when they do, they're very changed. When the main character goes into the forest a couple of times in this story, she immediately is, her personality has changed. She's overcome with these angry, evil, hateful thoughts about people that she loves. They seem very irrational to her. They seem crazy to her. And while she's asking, why am I feeling this way? She can't help it. And so it's very allegorical about how, we can allow evil to change who we are, to change the very heart of us, and how there's just things we're curious about that we should not even begin to pursue because of the potential for that evil to change who we are and how we feel about who we love, and just kind of turn us into really hateful people. I loved that. I loved so much about the story. But anyway, as time goes on and what's in the forest starts to affect what's in the town, the people do become more hateful. And the last part of this book is so chaotic. It's so crazy. It's so just out of control. Partly because it just really is, and partly because the whole rest of the book was so calm. Like the whole time, I was just waiting for the drop-off. I knew what was going to happen, but the way that the author drug it out so long while still maintaining that just undercurrent of creepiness, everybody in this book was just a little off. It was just a little weird. You just knew there was just something not quite right. And I don't think that the story was actually set in a different period of history. I think that this community was just kind of outside of time. Sort of like our Amish communities are today, where, if you enter in and you ignore what you hear on the highway, you can kind of convince yourself that you are in a different period of history, when in reality, it's just a little place outside of time that functions completely different than the rest of the communities around it. And I think that's kind of what was going on in this story. And it kind of added to the creepiness factor, actually, just because you knew something was going to happen, but you didn't quite know what. So, again, that's Small Favors by Erin Craig. It's one of those things where I'm not sure if I should recommend it, because it did feature some themes that are anti-biblical, but there's also a lot of really great biblical themes here, intentional by the author or not. I got a lot out of it, and I'm still thinking about it. So I won't recommend, I won't not recommend. You guys are all gonna do what you want anyway. That's just my thoughts. I read most of that on Saturday, and so in between that, I took a little break and I read portions of the Prayers of Jane Austen throughout the day until I had read all of them. So the book has a little introduction, kind of a biographical introduction, and then it has 3 prayers written out that were things they had found in Jane Austen's, you know, stuff or letters or whatever, of prayers that she had written out. And then the end has a little bit more biographical information, and it really focuses on Jane Austen's true faith. And so some modern biographers have tried to sort of paint her as a very liberal, feminist, a person who was stuck in religion because of the choices of her father to be a religious leader and whatever. That's just the way she grew up. But, all these clues from her writing tell us otherwise. I don't think so. I've never thought that. I've never understood that when I've read that in modern biographies. That's just not true. These prayers that are written out by her, they're legit from the heart prayers. And if you have a relationship with the Father yourself, you see that. You recognize this is a legitimate faith. This is a quiet faith. This is a faith that didn't need to be out there exploding all over the place for everybody to see and, say, oh wow, what a wonderful, pious, righteous young woman. It was a quiet faith of someone who probably couldn't imagine living any other way. This was her life, and God was a huge part of it, right? And her Savior was a huge part of it. So I really did enjoy reading these. I think I'm going to take this along with me when I go to England next month and read some of these in, the settings, all the Jane settings. And I've always been interested, that's like a line of study that I've always kind of wanted to do, is studying out the evidence that we have of Jane Austen's strong faith. And so maybe I'll get to do a little bit of that when I'm there. And so after that, I know that I've had at least 3 DNFs this week. I cannot settle on anything. I think my brain is just bored, and it's time to stop this mood read May that I have enjoyed so much and go back to, I kind of always am a mood reader. I don't really have any reason to read things that I don't want to read. And so I'm always really a mood reader, but a gentle reader. I guess for May, I really focused on reading gentler things that just made me feel more peaceful and calm, and things that weren't super heavy. And so I've enjoyed it. It's been great. I know a lot of my friends are doing like the Summer of Joy or Joyful June or whatever. Like, you're all going into joyful reading. And that's what I feel like I did in May, was a joyful, gentle reading. If not for the entire month, at least for the first few weeks. Somebody I watched recently, when they did their weekly wrap up, they also talked about like films that they had been watching. And so I decided to start keeping a film journal so that I could talk about films that I watch, which I hardly watch any films. So that's kind of a goal that I have for this summer, is to watch more movies. I don't know if it's an attention span thing or if it's just me telling myself I could be doing something else right now, but I really struggle with sitting down and watching a full movie. However, I was talking to my oldest daughter, and she was like, you've got to watch Somewhere in Time, the one that has Christopher Reeve and, Dr. Quinn, medicine woman, whatever her name is. What is her name? You guys know who I'm talking about. Well, I hadn't watched it yet, and she's like, you really gotta watch that, you're gonna love it, you're gonna love it. I've heard so many people talk about how much they love it. It's like, the best romantic movie of the 80s, and it's a time travel movie based on a book. I hated it. I hated it. I gave it 0 out of 5 stars. I totally hated it. I hated everything about it. I cannot think of one thing that I liked about that movie. The costumes were completely inaccurate. Her hair changes colors like 900 times. And he has got to be the creepiest, stalkingest weirdo. I mean, I was cringing. I cannot think of one thing that I enjoyed about that movie. So basically, this guy, he's a playwright, He ends up with a artifact from the past that someone gives to him anonymously. He ends up somehow coincidentally showing up at a hotel where that person lived in the past. He becomes obsessed with this painting of a woman. Really weird obsessed. Super weird. It was really creeping me out. I did not understand. Then he ends up finding a way to hypnotize himself into going back in time and meeting this woman. And I won't go any further in the story because you guys might want to watch it and you might totally love it. And I might also be offending some people, so I apologize. But one or both of the people in this movie do not know the meaning of the word no, because she repeatedly rebuffs his advances. She repeatedly says no. He repeatedly keeps pushing. He repeatedly ignores her. And it just feeds that whole thing that we had to go through as kids in the 80s and 90s, where apparently it's romantic when a man forces himself on you. And apparently it's romantic when he's, rough and this take charge mentality. And apparently that's the manly thing to do, is just to sort of like force your own desires, whether it be, in your speech or in your actions. And it's romantic, I guess. And then the woman can't help but fall in love and be overcome and swooning at his manliness. And the whole time, he's like a super over-emotional baby disguised as a strong, heroic figure. I don't know. If you haven't watched that movie in a while and you totally think I'm out to lunch, maybe watch it again. From a 21st century perspective, I was like, ew. I did, after watching it, read a little on it and found out that it was based on a novel. And I was like, maybe I'll read the novel. Maybe the novel will be better. Until I realized that the screenplay was written by the author of the novel. And I was like, yeah, I'm not even going to bother with this. So my first foray into movie criticism was very critical. Thanks for watching, guys. Make sure and check out that link in the description box about the information emails for my upcoming tour. And hope you have a beautiful day and a great weekend. I will see you soon. Bye-bye.